back with mom. But because he doesn't feel safe, he runs away again, telling everybody, I don't feel safe. Law enforcement gets involved again. They find a gun in the home, which Kathy had lied to them about and said, oh no, I gave it to somebody else for safekeeping. Oh no, there's a gun there. She also claims that Collin attacked her again to law enforcement. She said, he was trying to run away and he battered me. So the sheriff's deputies look at her ring video and they're like, there was no battery. She tried to step in front of him and block him from leaving, escaping the situation, and may have brushed by her. That's what she was calling a battery and trying to get him arrested. But then she would have probably demanded that he come back home with her. Needless to say, much chaos. In March, in what I hope is a little bit of positive news in all of this, Collin gets his driver's license and he gets a job at Domino's. And he did get a car. Kathy didn't buy him the car like she wants everybody to believe. It came from a trust that existed separate from Kathy. He's still going back and forth between Susan and Kathy, managing to accomplish things as a 17-year-old, 16, then 17-year-old. And then we get to the end of August, beginning of September of 2024. And you'll see a text from Kathy in the end of August saying to her mom and to other people, I'm going into that dark place again. My therapist thinks I should go to a facility for at least a few days, but she doesn't. September 7th, you heard about the whole bookshelf thing. There was, in fact, an argument over whether Collin would help her put up a bookshelf. And he is not being entirely respectful to her when he says, it'll take too long, I have to go to work. Also, there aren't studs on that wall. If we put it up there, it's going to fall and it's probably going to hurt someone. So did he help her put up the bookshelf? Absolutely not. Should he have? Maybe, but he didn't. And this is Kathy's reaction, and you will hear her words and see her. Get out and don't come back. Even if you're bawling your eyes out. And give me the keys to the house. So Collin's gathering things. He goes out the door. You may or may not see her opening the door and then closing it and locking it with his keys to the locked house inside. So Collin, being kicked out again, calls Susan, who is a concurrent guardian. By the way, Collin had been put on probation for the domestic violence battery, and his probation officer's name is Monique. You'll hear about her. And the court had said that even though most of the time you're not allowed to go out of the county when you're on probation, unless you're with a parent, it's okay for Collin to go visit his grandmother in another county. Just got to let Monique know. Okay. So Collin emails Monique, says, I'm going to my grandmother's. Called his grandmother, said, Mom kicked me out. Can I go to your house? She said, sure. She says, I'm in the Keys right now, but I'll be there tomorrow. Okay. So it wasn't like he was secretly going to this place where he can have a rager. This is something that has happened multiple times. So he drives to Polk County, and you'll hear from the neighbors that his car got there on Saturday and did not move. So meanwhile, Kathy is getting worked up, to say the least, angry. I think one detective may describe her as manic. She starts in the early morning hours of Sunday the 8th, making repeated calls to Susan and to Collin, and will beg, plead, yell, cuss, call people names. She calls her mom a fucking moron. She is all over the place, insisting that Collin come back home. But at the same time, she'd say, I reported the car stolen because the car is not in your name. It's in both our names, and you're not allowed to drive that car. But you better get in that car and come right back home. But wait, I took money out of your bank account, so you can't even afford to put gas in it, but you better come back home. Get in that car and come back home. I'm going to sell the car. I sold the car. I'm already up in Auburndale. I found a buyer whose aunt lives in that community and who gave me the gate code so I could come into the neighborhood in Auburndale, and I couldn't see the car at Susan's house. You're in big trouble because I already sold that car. She was nowhere near Auburndale. You'll see the ring video. She was at her home. But she made up this elaborate story about having gone to Auburndale, gotten the gate code from the buyer's aunt, and going in and not seeing the car when the neighbors were like, the car never left. She is doing everything she can to get Collin to come home. She calls law enforcement, Detective Zanoniani and Corporal Rentis. There's no secret that Collin is in Auburndale and that his grandmother has okayed it. It's okay with his probation officer. Everybody tells Kathy, let him stay in Auburndale. Let him stay in Auburndale. Let him stay in Auburndale. Kathy claims on one of her phone calls that the police gave her 24 hours of Collin being gone until she was going to get in trouble for him being a runaway. No. You'll read her texts. You'll listen to her messages. Despite everyone telling her, let Collin stay in Auburndale, she wasn't having it. She was the one who was angry. You'll hear Collin's voice when she says, are you coming home or not? No. Which is what law enforcement, Susan, everybody recommended, is that he don't go home. She went to him. She went to where he was safe. And the neighbors that you heard about will tell you that she came in hot and angry, that she sped into this quiet 55 and older community, whipped her car into the driveway, whipped it back out, pulled in front of the house, got out, slammed the door, and marched up to the carport door. Collin was never in the yard where her earbud was. She went up to the house and went in the house, angry. Within a few minutes, Kathy comes back out of the house, unlocks Collin's car, and starts throwing all of his stuff into it. And then after she's done throwing his stuff into it, you'll hear the neighbors say that she was yelling and shaking her fist, and it looked like she was the one who was being aggressive, and that Collin was standing in the doorway. So there's a door that goes into the living room and out to the carport, and that he was standing in the doorway. And when she comes up and you'll hear varying terms. You'll hear that he put his hand on her shoulder by where her ponytail was and kind of brought her inside. I don't know that you'll hear a neighbor say that he dragged her from the yard by her ponytail, by her hair. They will say that they heard her yelling. You can evaluate whether you think Collin was doing anything at that point to harm her. That's going to be part of your decision. Or if you think he was trying to avoid her making a scene in the community where teenagers aren't supposed to be living, you'll hear from the neighbors that they had seen Collin there before. He was never a problem. He would visit Susan because, like I said, he went back and forth, but they had never seen Kathy there before, ever. So Kathy and Collin go back into the house, and it's about an hour later that Collin calls 911, crying, upset, saying, "We got in a long fight. My mother's bleeding out. Please send someone right away." The 911 operator explains how to do CPR, tells him to move her, to lay her on her back, to be able to do CPR. You'll hear him doing CPR on her while counting with the 911 operator. And intermittently, he'll say, "Just send someone. She's not bleeding anymore." And when first responders get there, she was already dead. What you're going to have to decide at the end of all this and by the way, Collin has wounds too, is whether the state has proved to you beyond a reasonable doubt that what they claim happened, that Collin somehow planned this, he's been plotting it for months, that he murdered and dragged his mom into the house that she went to where he was safe to kill her, or whether what Collin had been saying he was afraid would happen and that had happened in the past actually was what occurred. That his mom came to him, went into the house where he was safe,